You don't look at the face when you're doing CPR. You look at the rhythm of the heart. For trauma nurse Claire Bennett, that focus saved a man's life but destroyed her own. One rainy night in Chicago, she made a choice. Ignore a hospital administrator's direct order to treat a wealthy donor's son with a broken finger, and instead save the dirty, unidentified soldier bleeding out in the hallway. By morning she was fired, blacklisted, and broken. She thought it was over, but she didn't know that the John Doe she saved was Colonel Garrett Sterling, a man who commands entire armies, and he doesn't leave his debts unpaid. The rain didn't just fall on Chicago that night. It punished the city. It hammered against the ambulance bay doors of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital like 1,000 angry fists, a rhythmic prelude to the chaos unfolding inside. Claire Bennett, a trauma nurse with 7 years in the pit, as they called the ER, wiped a stray lock of blonde hair from her forehead with the back of her wrist. Her gloves were already snapped on, tight and blue, a second skin she wore more often than her own. The air smelled of antiseptic, wet wool, and the metallic tang of old blood. "Incoming!" The paramedic's voice cracked over the radio, distorted by the storm's static. "Multi-vehicle pile-up on I-90. We have a bus rollover and 3 sedans. ETA 2 minutes. It's a war zone out there." Dr. Aris Thorne, the attending physician that night, looked up from his chart. He was a good doctor, skilled but weary, his shoulders perpetually slumped under the weight of hospital bureaucracy. "All hands," he barked. "Clear trauma 1 and 2. Move the flu cases to the hallway. If they can walk, they wait." Claire moved with the fluid precision of a dancer. She checked the crash cart, spiked a bag of saline, and lined up intubation kits. Her heart rate barely climbed. This was the job. This was the life. The doors burst open. The sound of the storm roared into the sterile bay, bringing with it a gust of freezing wind and a parade of gurneys. "What do we have?" Claire shouted, rushing to the first stretcher. "Male, mid-30s, unidentifiable," the paramedic yelled, breathless. He was soaked, water dripping from his nose onto the patient's chest. "Found him near the guardrail. Deep laceration to the femoral artery, multiple shrapnel wounds. BP is 60/40. He's crashing." Claire looked down. The man was a mess of mud and blood. He wore tattered tactical gear, not standard military issue, but high-end, rugged. His face was obscured by grime and a mask of coagulating blood, but his jaw was set in a grimace of unconscious defiance. "Get a line in! 2 large-bore IVs, wide open!" Claire commanded, her voice cutting through the din. She cut away the man's soak-stained pants, exposing the jagged tear in his thigh. He was bleeding out fast. Just as she clamped a hemostat onto a spurting vessel, the ER doors swung open again. This time it wasn't a rush of paramedics, but a pristine, private security detail flanking a wheelchair. Sitting in the chair was Julian Vance, the 20-year-old son of Senator Vance, the hospital's largest donor. He was clutching his wrist, his face pale but clearly alert. Beside him walked Administrator Beatrice Goldwell. Goldwell was a woman who wore stilettos to a trauma ward. Her suit was sharp, her bob cut sharper, and her eyes scanned the room, not for patients, but for liabilities. "Nurse Bennett!" Goldwell's voice was high and piercing, like a violin string about to snap. Claire didn't look up. She was compressing the soldier's wound, her body weight leaning into the task. "Busy, Miss Goldwell?" "Mr. Vance has been in a minor accident," Goldwell announced, stepping into the trauma bay, her heels clicking on the linoleum. "He's in pain. I need you to triage him immediately. Trauma 1 is reserved for VIPs." Claire glanced at the monitors. The soldier's heart rate was thready, 140 beats per minute and climbing. "This man is dying," Claire snapped. "Julian has a wrist injury. He can wait in Bay 4. "He will not wait in Bay 4, Goldwell hissed, stepping closer. The security guards loomed behind her. "The senator is on his way. I want his son in the best bed with the best nurse. That is you. Move this vagrant to the hallway." The ER went silent. Even Dr. Thorne froze, a syringe hovering over a tray. Claire looked at the soldier. He had no name tag, no rank insignia, just a faded tattoo on his forearm, a spear through a lightning bolt, half obscured by mud. He was nobody. And Julian Vance was the golden ticket to a new hospital wing. "Did you hear me?" Goldwell demanded. "That is a direct order from your superior." Claire looked at the monitor. The soldier's rhythm wavered. "V-fib." "He's coding!" Claire yelled, ignoring Goldwell. "Charge the paddles! 200 joules!" "Bennett!" Goldwell screamed. "Step away from the patient!" Claire grabbed the paddles. "Clear!" The soldier's body arched off the table. Flatline. "Again! 300 joules! Clear!" Thump. A rhythm. Weak, erratic, but there. "Dr. Thorne, I need you here now," Claire ordered, her eyes locked on the soldier's chest, watching the rise and fall. "He needs surgery. Now." Goldwell was trembling with rage. Her face, usually a mask of corporate composure, was flushed red. "You have made a grave mistake, Claire. You just prioritized a John Doe over the future of this hospital." Claire finally looked up, her hands covered in the soldier's blood. She looked Goldwell dead in the eye. "I prioritized a life over a donation. If that's a mistake, then I don't want to be right." She turned back to the gurney. "Let's move, or 3 is open." They wheeled the soldier out, leaving Goldwell standing in the trauma bay, the beep of Julian Vance's perfectly stable heart monitor mocking her in the background. The surgery took 6 hours. Claire didn't scrub in. She was an ER nurse, not surgical. But she paced the waiting room, drinking stale coffee, adrenaline slowly souring into dread. When the surgeon finally came out, he looked exhausted. "He made it," he told Claire. "Barely. Whoever he is, he's tough. Took 3 bullets and a piece of rebar to the leg. But he's stable." Claire exhaled, a breath she felt she'd been holding since the doors opened. She went to the locker room to change. Her scrubs were ruined, stained with the rust-colored evidence of her insubordination. She opened her locker and found a white envelope taped to her coat. There was no name on it, just the hospital logo. She tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Notice of termination. Reason, gross insubordination, failure to adhere to triage protocol, endangering patient relations. Effective immediately. The door to the locker room opened. It wasn't a colleague. It was 2 security guards, the same ones who had escorted Julian Vance. "Miss Bennett," the taller one said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "We've been instructed to escort you off the premises. You are to leave your badge and any hospital property here." "I have patient notes to finish," Claire stammered, the paper trembling in her hand. "I need to chart for the John Doe." "Access denied," the guard said. He stepped forward, his hand resting near his belt. "Now, ma'am." Claire felt the room spin. 7 years. 7 years of missed Christmases, double shifts, holding the hands of dying children, and talking down violent drunks. Gone in a heartbeat because she didn't fluff a rich kid's pillow. She stripped off her badge, the plastic rectangle that had defined her identity for nearly a decade, and dropped it on the bench. It clattered loudly in the quiet room. She walked out the back exit into the rain that was still falling. She didn't have an umbrella. She walked to her car, a beat-up Honda Civic that needed new brakes, and sat in the driver's seat. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just stared at the hospital, a glowing fortress of glass and steel. Somewhere on the 4th floor, in the ICU, a man without a name was breathing because of her. And because of him, she had nothing. The next morning, the blacklisting began. Claire applied to Mercy Hospital across town. The hiring manager was enthusiastic until she made a phone call. When she came back, her face was closed off. "We went in a different direction," she said. She tried a private clinic in the suburbs. "Your file has a red flag," the doctor told her quietly. "St. Jude's flagged you for negligence." "Claire, if that's on your record, no one in Illinois will touch you." "It wasn't negligence," Claire argued, desperation creeping into her voice. "I saved a man's life." "It doesn't matter what you did," the doctor said sadly. It matters who you angered. Beatrice Goldwell sits on the state licensing board. You're done, Claire." 2 weeks later, Claire was working the night shift at Sal's Diner on the south side of the city. The uniform was pink and smelled of grease. She traded trauma shears for a spatula, intubation for pouring coffee. Every night she checked the news, scanning for reports on the John Doe at St. Jude S. Nothing. No family came forward. No identification. He was a ghost. One Tuesday, a month after the firing, she was wiping down the counter when a news report flashed on the small TV mounted in the corner of the diner. Senator Vance announces a new $10 million donation to St. Jude's Memorial, specifically for the new Julian Vance Trauma Center. Administrator Beatrice Goldwell accepted the check, citing the hospital's unwavering commitment to excellence and protocol. Claire watched Goldwell smiling on the screen, shaking the senator's hand. She felt a bitter bile rise in her throat. She turned off the TV. "Hey, honey, more coffee?" a trucker asked from a booth. "Coming right up," Claire said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't know that 3 miles away, in a secure private room at St. Jude's, the ghost had opened his eyes. The man known as John Doe blinked against the harsh fluorescent light. His body felt like lead. His leg throbbed with a dull, heavy ache. He tried to sit up, but a nurse, not Claire, pushed him gently back down. "Easy there, soldier," the nurse said. "You've been out for a long time." His voice was a rusty rasp. "Where am I?" "St. Jude's Hospital. Chicago." He closed his eyes for a moment, memories flashing back. The ambush, the extraction point. The betrayal. The crash. He remembered the rain. And he remembered blue eyes. Intense, focused blue eyes. A voice that cut through the darkness. "I prioritized a life over a donation." "The nurse," he rasped. "Where is the nurse?" "I'm right here," the woman said soothingly. "No," he growled, the command in his voice cutting through his weakness. "The one with the blonde hair. The one who fought for me." "I don't know who you mean," the nurse said, checking his IV. "You've had a lot of staff rotating through." "Find her," he said. He looked at his arm, checking for the IV line, and saw his wrist. The watch was gone, but the tattoo was there. The spear and the lightning bolt. "My name," he said, his voice gaining strength, "is Colonel Garrett Sterling. I need a secure line to the Pentagon, and I need you to find the woman who saved my life." The nurse laughed nervously. "Sir, you're confused. You had no ID. You're a John Doe." Sterling looked at her. It was the look of a wolf assessing a sheep. That wasn't a request. Recovery for Garrett Sterling was not a passive process. It was a campaign. Within 24 hours of waking, his identity was verified. The John Doe vanished from the hospital records, replaced by a high-security patient designation that required 2 armed MPs, military police, outside his door at all times. Administrator Goldwell was thrilled. A war hero? In her hospital? It was better press than the senator's son. She arrived in his room on the second day, a bouquet of lilies in her arms. "Colonel Sterling," she cooed, standing at the foot of his bed. "It is an honor. I am Beatrice Goldwell, the administrator. We are so relieved you pulled through. We gave you the very best care." Sterling was sitting up, reading a dossier that a man in a black suit had delivered an hour ago. He didn't look at the flowers. He looked at Goldwell. His eyes were grey, like steel in winter. "The best care," Sterling repeated flatly. "Absolutely, Doctor. Thorn is our finest." "I remember a woman," Sterling said. "Blonde, sharp. She yelled at you." Goldwell's smile didn't falter, but her eyes tightened. "Oh, I believe you must be hallucinating from the trauma. We don't have anyone like that." "I don't hallucinate, Miss Goldwell," Sterling said. "She saved me when you wanted to shove me in a closet to treat a bruised pinky." "Where is she?" "I assure you, Colonel, no one was shoved." Goldwell waved her hand dismissively. There was a nurse, a temporary staff member who was difficult. She was let go for incompetence shortly after your admission. She nearly killed you with improper dosage." Sterling's hand clenched the file. "Incompetence? Yes. Tragically unskilled. But we rectified the situation immediately to ensure your safety." Sterling stared at her for a long moment. He had interrogated insurgents, spies, and traitors. He knew the smell of a lie. It smelled like expensive perfume and fear. "Get out," he said quietly. "Excuse me?" "Get out, and take the flowers. I'm allergic to bullshit." Goldwell stiffened, turned on her heel, and left. Sterling picked up the secure phone on his bedside table. He dialed a number from memory. "Ghost Team," a voice answered. "It's Sterling. I'm active." "Boss, we thought you were KIA. We were about to burn the safe house." "Not yet. I need to locate. Civilian, female. Nurse at St. Jude's up until a month ago. Blonde, name unknown. She was fired the night I was brought in." "On it. Give us 20 minutes. It took 15. Got her, boss. Claire Bennett, top of her class at Rush University. 7 years trauma experience. Spotless record until 4 weeks ago. Fired for gross insubordination. License suspended pending review." "Where is she now?" "Running plates. Looks like she's parked behind a place called Sal's Diner on 43rd. Boss, that's a rough neighborhood." Sterling ripped the IV out of his arm. Blood trickled down his wrist, but he didn't care. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. The pain in his thigh was blinding, a white-hot poker. But pain was just information. "Get the SUV," Sterling ordered. "Pick me up at the south loading dock. We're going to get my nurse." Claire was exhausted. It was 2 a.m. The diner was empty except for a drunk sleeping in the back booth and the cook, Al, who was scraping the grill. She was counting her tips. $12. That wouldn't even cover gas. The bell above the door jingled. "We're closed," Claire called out without looking up. "Grill's off." "I'm not hungry." The voice was low, gravelly, and familiar. Claire froze. She looked up. Standing in the doorway was a man leaning heavily on a cane, flanked by 2 men who looked like they chewed glass for breakfast. The man in the middle was pale, gaunt, and clearly in pain, but he was upright. He was wearing a black tactical jacket over a hospital gown that had been tucked into jeans. It was the John Doe. Claire dropped the stack of quarters. They rolled across the floor. "You," she whispered, "you're alive." Sterling limped forward, the cane thumping rhythmically on the greasy tile. He stopped at the counter. He looked at her name tag, Sal's Diner, Claire. "Claire," he said, testing the name. "I'm Garrett." "You shouldn't be walking," she said, her nurse instincts overriding her shock. "You had a femoral repair. You could tear the sutures." "I've had worse," he said. He looked around the dingy diner. "You're working here?" "It's the only place that would take me," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "Thanks to you." The big men behind him bristled, but Sterling held up a hand. "I know," Sterling said softly. "I heard what happened. You traded your career for my life." "I'd do it again," Claire said, chin held high. "Even if you are, whoever you are." "I'm the man who is going to fix this," Sterling said. "Pack your things, Claire." "Excuse me, I'm on shift, and I don't go anywhere with strange men," Sterling smirked. It changed his whole face, taking years off the hard lines. "I'm not a strange man. I'm a commander in the United States Special Forces, and right now, I'm your ride." "Ride to where?" "Back to St. Jude, S." Claire laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "I can't go back there. If I step foot on the property, they'll arrest me for trespassing. Goldwell made sure of it." Sterling turned to the men behind him. "Lieutenant, is the convoy ready?" "Yes, sir. 3 armored vehicles. Police escort is on standby." Sterling turned back to Claire. "Let them try to arrest you when you're with me. You're not going back as a fired employee, Claire. You're going back as my personal medical liaison. And we have a meeting with Miss Goldwell." Claire looked at him. She saw the steel in his eyes, but also a profound gratitude. For the first time in a month, she didn't feel alone. She untied her apron and threw it on the counter. "Al!" she yelled to the cook. "I quit!" The ride from Sal's Diner to St. Jude's Memorial was a study in contrasts. Outside the tinted, bulletproof windows of the black SUV, Chicago was a blur of neon lights and wet pavement. Inside, the air was still and smelled of rich leather and gun oil. Claire sat on the edge of the plush seat, her hands gripping her knees. She was still wearing her pink diner uniform, a grease stain on the collar mocking her sudden elevation in status. Across from her sat Colonel Garrett Sterling. He had refused the stretcher in the back of the second vehicle, insisting on sitting upright despite the agony clearly etched into the lines of his face. "You're in pain," Claire said, her nurse's eye catching the way his jaw tightened every time the SUV hit a pothole. "You need morphine, or at least high-dose ibuprofen." "I need answers," Garrett gritted out, shifting his leg. The heavy black tactical pants he now wore concealed the bandages, but Claire knew exactly what lay beneath. A map of staples and sutures holding his femoral artery together. "And I need to see the look on Goldwell's face when I walk back through those doors." "She's going to call the police," Claire warned. "She has the senator in her pocket. The Vances own half the board." "Let her call," Garrett said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "I have the 75th Ranger Regiment on speed dial. We'll see who shows up first." He looked at her then, really looked at her. In the dim light of the passing street lamps, his eyes were piercing. "Why didn't you leave?" he asked suddenly. "Leave?" "Chicago. After they blacklisted you. You could have gone to Wisconsin, Indiana. Started over." Claire looked out the window. "My mother," she said softly. "She's in a care facility in Oak Park. Early onset dementia. If I leave the state, I lose my visitation rights, and her insurance defaults. I couldn't leave her." Garrett went silent. The file his team had pulled up mentioned her debts, her firing, and her spotless record. It hadn't mentioned the mother. It made sense now. The desperation in the diner, the exhaustion in her eyes. She hadn't just been fighting for her job. She had been fighting for her mother's life. "Driver," Garrett barked. "ETA. 2 minutes out, Colonel. We have a visual on the perimeter. Hospital security is deploying." "Good," Garrett said. He checked the slide on a sidearm he had retrieved from a hidden compartment, then holstered it. "You can't bring a gun into a hospital," Claire exclaimed. "I can do whatever I want, Claire," he replied calmly. "I'm not a patient anymore. I'm an active investigation." The arrival was nothing short of a spectacle. 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt at the main entrance of St. Jude S, blocking the valet lane. The lead vehicle's doors flew open, and 4 men in tactical gear, Garrett's personal security detail, the Ghost Team, spilled out. They didn't shout. They didn't run. They moved with the terrifying, silent efficiency of predators claiming territory. Hospital security guards, mostly retired cops in ill-fitting blazers, stepped forward, hands on their belts. "You can't park here," the head guard shouted. "This is a private—" He stopped as the rear door of the middle SUV opened. Colonel Sterling stepped out. He leaned heavily on a black cane with a silver wolf's head handle, but his posture was upright, radiating a command presence that sucked the air out of the breezeway. Claire stepped out behind him, feeling small in her pink uniform. She saw the shock register on the faces of the valet staff. "That's the diner waitress," their eyes seemed to say. "What is she doing with him?" "We're going to the executive suite," Garrett announced. It wasn't a question. "Sir, visiting hours are over," the guard stammered, intimidated by the sheer size of the men flanking Garrett. "I'm not visiting," Garrett said, limping forward. "I'm inspecting." They swept through the lobby like a storm front. Patients in the waiting room lowered their magazines. Nurses at the triage desk stopped typing. The sight of the mud-caked soldier from weeks ago, now cleaned up and dressed in tactical black, walking beside the fired nurse, sent a ripple of whispers through the atrium. Is that Claire? Is that the John Doe? They reached the elevators. One of Garrett's men swiped a keycard that bypassed the security lockout. "How do you have that?" Claire whispered as the doors slid shut, sealing them in. "Federal override," the soldier next to her said with a wink. "Standard issue." The elevator dinged on the 12th floor. Administration. The hallway was carpeted in plush navy blue, the walls adorned with oil paintings of old white men who had donated wings and pavilions. At the end of the hall, double mahogany doors led to the boardroom. "They're in session," Claire said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "The quarterly budget meeting. All the department heads are there, including Dr. Thorne." "Perfect," Garrett said. He didn't knock. He simply pushed the doors open. The room fell silent. 20 heads turned. At the head of the table sat Beatrice Galdwell, projecting a PowerPoint slide about cost efficiency and trauma care. To her right sat Senator William Vance, a man with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What is the meaning of this?" Galdwell stood up, her laser pointer shaking slightly. "Security." "Security is downstairs," Garrett said, his voice echoing in the large room. He limped to the foot of the table, apologizing for the delay. "Colonel Sterling," Senator Vance said, standing up and smoothing his suit jacket. He put on his politician's mask. "We were told you had been discharged. We were planning a ceremony to honor your recovery." "I was discharged," Garrett said dryly, "by myself, because I found the level of care lacking." "Lacking?" Galdwell bristled. "We gave you the VIP suite." "You gave me a room," Garrett corrected, "but weeks ago, when I was bleeding out on your floor, you gave an order to let me die." The room went deathly quiet. Dr. Thorne, sitting midway down the table, looked down at his hands. "I don't know what you're talking about," Galdwell lied, her face pale. "I think you do," Garrett said. He stepped aside, revealing Claire. She stood there, hands clasped, chin high. She saw Dr. Thorne flinch. She saw the recognition in the eyes of the other department heads. "This woman," Garrett said, gesturing to Claire, "saved my life. She defied your direct order to treat a bruised wrist over a severed artery. And for that you fired her. You blacklisted her. You tried to starve her out." "She was insubordinate," Galdwell shrieked, losing her composure. "She violated protocol." "She followed the Hippocratic Oath," Garrett roared, slamming his hand on the table. The sound cracked like a gunshot. "Something you forgot long ago." He pulled a document from his jacket. "This is an executive order from the Department of Defense. As of 0800 hours, St. Jude's is designated a primary care facility for high-value military assets, pending an investigation into my accident. That gives me jurisdiction over my own medical team." He slid the paper down the long table. It stopped in front of Senator Vance. "I am reinstating Claire Bennett," Garrett declared. "Effective immediately. She is now the head nurse of the new military liaison unit. She reports to me. Not you. Not the board. Me." "You can't do that," Galdwell gasped. "So we have union rules. We have hiring freezes. Try me," Garrett said, "or I can have the Pentagon audit every single donation made by the Vance Foundation in the last 5 years. I'm sure everything is perfectly legal. Right, Senator?" Senator Vance went rigid. He looked at Galdwell, then at the paper, then at Garrett. He sat down slowly. "Beatrice," the senator said quietly, "reignite Miss Bennett's credentials. But do it!" Galdwell looked at Claire with pure, distilled hatred. "Fine," she spat. "Welcome back, Nurse Bennett." "Thank you," Claire said, her voice steady, though her knees were shaking. "I'll need my back pay, and an apology." "Don't push it," Galdwell hissed. "Apologize," Garrett commanded. Galdwell swallowed hard. "I apologize for the misunderstanding." "Accepted," Claire said. "Now," Garrett said, turning to leave. "We have rounds to do. Claire, you're with me." As they walked out, leaving the stunned board of directors in their wake, Claire felt a strange sensation. It wasn't just victory. It was safety. For the first time in her life, the monster under the bed was afraid of the man standing next to her. Returning to the ER was not the homecoming parade Claire might have imagined. It was a walk through a minefield. The news of the boardroom confrontation had spread through the hospital grapevine at light speed. As Claire walked into the locker room to change into fresh scrubs, retrieved from the laundry by one of Garrett's scary guards, the silence was deafening. Her former colleagues, nurses she had shared lunches and heartbreaks with, averted their eyes. Some were jealous of her sudden promotion to liaison. Others were terrified that speaking to her would invite Goldwell's wrath. Only Sarah, a young intern, dared to approach. "Is it true?" Sarah whispered, pretending to check her locker. "Did you really make Goldwell apologize?" "I didn't," Claire whispered back, pulling on the familiar blue top. "He did." "Be careful, Claire," Sarah warned, her eyes darting to the door. "Goldwell is on the warpath. She's already cutting hours for anyone who was on shift that night. She's looking for a reason to burn you. And that guy, the colonel, he won't be here forever." That was the thought that gnawed at Claire. Garrett Sterling was a force of nature, but he was a soldier. Soldiers left, they deployed, they died. Eventually he would heal, and he would go, leaving her alone in the cage with the tiger she had just poked. Claire walked out to the floor. Her assignment was technically military liaison, which meant her only patient was Garrett, who had commandeered a private recovery room on the 4th floor. But she couldn't just sit there. The ER was understaffed, as always. She saw Dr. Thorne struggling with a cardiac arrest in trauma 2. Instinct took over. She grabbed a crash cart and ran in. "I'm in," she announced, charging the paddles. Dr. Thorne looked up, relief washing over his tired face. "Claire, thank God. Sinus tach, converting to VFib." They worked in sync, a rhythm established over years. Within 10 minutes, the patient was stabilized. "Good work," Thorne said, stripping off his gloves. He pulled her aside. "Claire, about that night." "Don't," Claire said, washing her hands. "You wanted to keep your job. I get it. You have kids." "It was cowardly," Thorne admitted. "But listen to me. Vance, the son, Julian, he's back." Claire froze. "What?" "He was admitted an hour ago. Abdominal pain. He's in the VIP wing, 2 doors down from your colonel." "Why is he here?" "I don't know." Thorne lowered his voice. "But he's been asking for narcotics, and he's been asking about you." A cold chill ran down Claire's spine. She went up to the 4th floor. 2 of Garrett's ghost team members were stationed outside his room, sitting on folding chairs, cleaning their fingernails with combat knives. They nodded at her as she passed. She entered Garrett's room. He was sitting in a chair by the window, laptop open, phone to his ear. "Trace the Shell Corporation," he was saying. "I want to know who paid for the sabotage on my vehicle." "No, I don't care if it links to the mayor." He hung up when he saw her. "Nurse on deck." "You should be resting," Claire said, checking his vitals monitor. "BP is elevated." "I found something," Garrett said, lowering his voice. He gestured for her to come closer. "The accident on I-90. It wasn't an accident. Someone cut my brake line. And the rebar that went through my leg? It was from a construction barrier that had been moved into the road intentionally." "Who would want to kill you?" Claire asked, horrified. "I was investigating the theft of military-grade medical supplies," Garrett said. "Painkillers, fentanyl, morphine. Thousands of doses disappearing from VA shipments in the Midwest. The trail led here, to Chicago." Claire's eyes widened. "St. Jude S? Maybe. I was coming to meet a source that night. He never showed up. I crashed instead." Garrett looked at her intensely. "Claire, Goldwell isn't just a mean administrator. She's covering something up, and now I've put a target on your back by bringing you into this." "I can handle Goldwell," Claire said, though she wasn't sure if it was true. "It's not just her," Garrett said. "My source. He sent me a message before I crashed. He said the supplies were being moved through VIP channels." VIP channels? Claire thought of Julian Vance, the son of the biggest donor, the boy who demanded narcotics for a bruised finger, the boy who was currently 2 doors down. "Julian Vance is here," Claire whispered. Garrett's eyes narrowed. "Is he?" "Dr. Thorne told me. He's in room 404. "Get me a wheelchair," Garrett ordered. "Garrett, you can't—" "I need to see him. If the senator is using his son's medical needs to move product, we need to know." Against her better judgment, Claire helped Garrett into a wheelchair. She pushed him down the hall, past the nurses' station where heads turned and whispers followed. Room 404 was guarded not by hospital security, but by private bodyguards, men in suits who looked far less disciplined than Garrett's team. "Stop," one of the suits said, stepping in front of the door. "Mr. Vance is resting." "I'm just welcoming a neighbor," Garrett said, his voice deceptively light. Before the guard could react, the door opened from the inside. Julian Vance stood there. He looked terrible, sweaty, pale, pupils dilated. He wasn't in pain. He was in withdrawal. "Let them in," Julian rasped. The guard stepped aside. Claire wheeled Garrett in. The room smelled of stale sweat. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. "The hero returns," Julian sneered, though his voice cracked. "My dad is furious, you know. He hates being embarrassed." "I don't care about your dad," Garrett said calmly. "I care about what you're putting in your veins, Julian, and where you're getting it." Julian laughed, a manic sound. "I get the best. Top shelf. Military grade." Claire gasped. "Who gives it to you?" Garrett pressed. "Beatrice." Julian grinned, his teeth yellow. "Auntie Beatrice takes care of me. As long as Daddy keeps writing checks for the new wing, Beatrice makes sure the candy jar is full. She skims it off the shipments from the VA. Easy peasy." "He's confessing," Claire whispered. "Why is he telling us this?" "Because he thinks he's untouchable," Garrett said, "and because he's high." "I'm not high!" Julian shouted, suddenly angry. He grabbed a glass vase from the table and threw it. It shattered against the wall, inches from Claire's head. "Get out!" Julian screamed. "I get out before I call security and tell them the nurse attacked me." Garrett grabbed Claire's arm. "We're leaving. We have what we need." He wheeled himself back towards the door, Claire following. As they exited, Julian screamed after them. "You think you're safe? You're nothing! My dad will bury you!" They made it back to Garrett's room. Garrett immediately reached for his phone. "I have enough for a warrant. If Goldwell is trafficking narcotics through the hospital." Suddenly the hospital intercom chimed. "Code Blue, room 404. Code Blue, room 404. Claire's blood ran cold. "Room 404. Julian. He was fine 2 minutes ago," Claire said. "He was yelling." "Go," Garrett said. "Go see what's happening. I'll call my team." Claire ran. She sprinted down the hallway. When she burst into room 404, chaos reigned. Julian was convulsing on the bed, foam at his mouth. Dr. Thorne was already there, doing compressions. "No pulse," Thorne yelled. "Push EPI." "Yeah, now." Goldwell was in the corner, screaming. "She did this! She was just in here!" Goldwell pointed a shaking finger at Claire. "She poisoned him!" Goldwell shrieked. "I saw her come out! She killed the senator's son!" Claire froze. On the bedside table next to Julian's water pitcher was a syringe. An empty syringe. It was a setup. Julian convulsed one last time and went still. The monitor whined its long, flat note. Dr. Thorne stopped compressions. He looked at the clock. "Time of death, 16:42. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the machines. Goldwell turned to the security guards. Her face was twisted in a mask of triumph and mock horror. "Arrest her," Goldwell commanded. "Arrest Claire Bennett for murder." The guards moved toward Claire. She backed up, hitting the wall. "I didn't touch him," she cried. "We were just talking." "Check her pockets," Goldwell yelled. A guard grabbed Claire, roughly shoving her hands against the wall. He patted down her scrub pocket. He pulled something out. A vial. Fentanyl. Claire stared at it in horror. She had never seen it before. "I didn't put that there," she screamed. "He planted it!" "Take her away," Caldwell said, her eyes cold as ice. "And call the police, the real police." As the cuffs clicked onto Claire's wrists, she looked out into the hallway. She saw Garrett trying to get out of his wheelchair, his guards held back by a dozen hospital security staff. "Claire!" Garrett roared, struggling against the men. But it was too late. They dragged her out the service elevator, away from the only man who could save her, as the shadow of the Vance Empire swallowed her whole. The holding cell at the 12th District Police Station was designed to break people, not hold them. It was a concrete box that smelled of industrial bleach and old fear. There were no windows, only a flickering fluorescent bulb caged in wire mesh that buzzed like an angry hornet. Claire sat on the metal bench, her knees pulled to her chest. She was still in her scrubs, now wrinkled and stained with sweat. The cuffs had been removed, but her wrists were bruised, purple rings marking where the metal had bitten into her skin. It had been 6 hours since they dragged her out of St. Jude's. 6 hours of interrogation. "Just sign the paper, Miss Bennett," the lead detective, a man named Detective Miller with tired eyes and a nicotine stain on his moustache, had said for the 10th time. "We found the fentanyl in your pocket. We have the administrator's testimony. We have the dead body of a senator's son. This is a slam dunk. If you plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter, maybe the senator shows mercy. 10 years. You'll be out in 5. "I didn't do it," Claire had whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "Caldwell planted it. Julian was an addict. She was supplying him." Miller had slammed his hand on the table. "So that is a United States senator's family you're slandering. Do you know who signs my paychecks? Do you know who runs this city? You're a fired nurse with a grudge. Nobody believes you." Now, alone in the cell, the weight of it crushed her. She thought of her mother in the care home. Who would pay the bills next month? Who would visit her? Her mother would die alone, wondering why Claire had abandoned her. Claire closed her eyes and let the tears fall. She had saved a soldier, and the world had punished her for it. Maybe she should have just looked away that night in the rain. Maybe kindness was a liability she couldn't afford. At St. Jude's Hospital, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The VIP wing was on lockdown. Senator Vance had arrived, flanked by lawyers and press agents, turning the waiting room into a command center for his vengeance. But in room 402, a different kind of war was being planned. Colonel Garrett Sterling was not in his bed. He was standing, fully dressed in his tactical gear, leaning heavily on the wall for support. His leg was screaming in agony. The sutures were holding, but the muscle was inflamed. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his hands were steady as he loaded a fresh magazine into his sidearm. "Boss, you can't do this," Lieutenant Ghost Evans said, blocking the doorway. "Your femoral artery is a ticking time bomb. If you bust a stitch in the field, you bleed out in 3 minutes. Medical wants you flat on your back for another week." "Claire doesn't have a week," Garrett growled. "She has until morning before they arraign her. Once she's in the system, Vance will bury her in a federal prison so deep we'll never find her. They'll make it look like a suicide within a month." "We can get lawyers." "Lawyers deal with laws," Garrett snapped. "Vance owns the law. We deal with truth, and the truth is on a server in the basement of this hospital." He limped to the table where his laptop sat open. "Caldwell is smart, but she's arrogant. She thinks deleting the security footage from the hallway is enough. But she forgot about the backup redundancy in the cloud. Every hospital has it for insurance liability." "It's encrypted, boss. NSA level." "Then get me the keys," Garrett ordered. "We're not leaving until we have proof." "Sir," another soldier, Sergeant Wells, spoke up from the window. "We have a problem. Chicago PD just pulled up. 4 cruisers. They aren't here for coffee. They're here to secure the witnesses. That means us." Garrett looked out the window. Blue lights flashed against the rain-slicked glass. "They want to silence me," Garrett realized. "If I testify that Julian was an addict, the senator's narrative falls apart. Garrett turned to his men. His eyes were cold, calculating, the eyes of a man who had survived impossible odds in deserts and jungles. We are leaving. Now. How? The elevators are locked down. The lobby is swarming with cops. Garrett picked up his cane. He looked at the fire alarm on the wall. "We're not taking the elevator," Garrett said. "We're taking the roof." The extraction was messy. Garrett's team triggered the fire alarm, plunging the hospital into chaos. As strobes flashed and sirens wailed, patients and staff flooded the hallways. In the confusion, the ghost team moved like smoke. They ascended the stairwell to the helipad. The wind was howling, the rain stinging like needles. A black military helicopter, called in by Garrett on a priority frequency, usually reserved for extraction of high-value targets in war zones, hovered above, its rotors chopping the night air. Garrett was hoisted up, his leg burning with every movement. As he strapped into the jump seat, he grabbed the headset. "Get me the JAG Corps," he shouted over the roar of the engine. "Get me the highest-ranking Judge Advocate General in the Pentagon. Wake him up. Sir, it's 3 a.m. in D.C. I don't care if he's sleeping with the President. Tell him Colonel Sterling is calling in his marker. Tell him I have a nurse to save." As the helicopter banked away from the hospital, Garrett looked down at the city lights. Somewhere in that grid of electricity was Claire. He touched the spot on his chest where his heart beat, a heart she had restarted. "Hang on, Claire," he whispered into the comms. "I'm coming." The next morning, the steps of the Cook County Courthouse were a sea of umbrellas and microphones. Senator William Vance stood at the podium, looking every bit the grieving father. Beatrice Caldwell stood dutifully behind him, wearing black, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. "My son," Vance's voice boomed, amplified by the speakers, "was a victim. Not just of a tragic accident, but of a predator in the medical profession. A nurse who violated her oath. A nurse who poisoned my boy with fentanyl." The crowd of reporters scribbled furiously. Flashbulbs popped. "We demand justice!" Vance shouted, his fist shaking. "We demand the maximum sentence for Claire Bennett. She is a stain on the healthcare system." Inside the courthouse, Claire was being led into the arraignment hearing. She was in an orange jumpsuit now, shackles on her ankles. She walked with her head down, the fight drained out of her. She was tired, so tired. The judge, the Honorable Marcus Sterling, no relation, simply a cruel coincidence of names, banged his gavel. "Case number 4492. The People versus Claire Bennett. Charges: first-degree murder, trafficking of controlled substances. How does the defendant plead?" Claire opened her mouth to speak, to say not guilty one last time, even if no one listened. Bang! The double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open, they were thrown wide. A hush fell over the room. Walking down the center aisle was not a lawyer. It was a phalanx of 4 soldiers in full-dress blues, medals gleaming on their chests. In the center walked Colonel Garrett Sterling. He was leaning on his cane, but he wore his uniform like armor. His chest was heavy with ribbons, Silver Star, Purple Heart, Distinguished Service Cross. "Who interrupts this court?" the judge demanded, peering over his glasses. "Colonel Garrett Sterling, United States Special Forces," Garrett announced, his voice carrying to the rafters without a microphone. "And I am here to present exculpatory evidence regarding the innocence of the defendant." "This is not a trial, Colonel," the judge said. "This is an arraignment. You have no standing here." "I have the standing of the United States military," Garrett said, stepping past the railing. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. "And I have proof that the evidence against Miss Bennett was fabricated." Senator Vance, sitting in the front row, stood up. His face was purple. "This is an outrage. Arrest this man." "Sit down, Senator," Garrett said, not even looking at him. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor, 12 hours ago, my team recovered deleted security footage from St. Jude's server. Footage that Administrator Goldwell thought she had scrubbed. Garrett nodded to his lieutenant, who plugged the drive into the court's presentation system. The large screens on the wall flickered to life. The video was grainy, black and white, but clear enough. It showed the interior of room 404. It showed Julian Vance, alive, pacing the room. It showed the door opening. Beatrice Goldwell walked in. The courtroom gasped. On screen, Goldwell handed Julian a vial and a syringe. They argued. Julian snatched them from her. Goldwell left. Julian sat on the bed, prepared the injection, and shot it into his arm. Moments later, he collapsed. The video fast-forwarded. Claire Bennett ran in. She started CPR, then Goldwell entered. The video zoomed in. As Claire was focused on compressions, Goldwell reached into her own pocket, pulled out a second vial, and slipped it into Claire's scrub pocket while pretending to assist. The courtroom erupted. "Order! Order!" The judge banged his gavel, but no one listened. Claire stared at the screen, her hand covering her mouth. It was there, the truth, in black and white. Garrett turned to the gallery. He pointed his cane at Goldwell. "That woman," Garrett declared, "murdered Julian Vance by supplying him with lethal narcotics, and she tried to frame the woman who tried to save him." Goldwell was trying to sneak towards the side exit. 2 military police officers blocked her path. "Beatrice Goldwell," Garrett said, his voice cold. "You are detained, pending federal charges for narcotics trafficking and conspiracy." Senator Vance looked at Goldwell, then at the video. He sank into his seat, burying his head in his hands. He knew it was over. The investigation would open his finances. The house of cards had fallen. "Miss Bennett," the judge said, his voice trembling slightly, "in light of this extraordinary evidence, the charges are dismissed with prejudice. You are free to go." The bailiff unlocked Claire's cuffs. The metal clicked open. Claire didn't run to the door. She ran to Garrett. He caught her, dropping his cane to wrap his arms around her. He winced as she squeezed him, his leg protesting, but he didn't let go. "You came back," she sobbed into his uniform. "You came back for me." "I told you," Garrett whispered into her hair. "I pay my debts. And you, Claire Bennett, are the only reason I'm breathing." 3 months later, the sign above the new wing of the hospital didn't say Vance Trauma Center. It had been renamed the Veterans Memorial Wing, funded by a massive seized asset forfeiture from the Vance estate. Claire walked through the sliding doors. She wasn't wearing scrubs. She was wearing a white coat, head of trauma nursing. She walked to the nurses' station. It was busy, chaotic, loud, just the way she liked it. "Bennett," Dr. Thorne called out. He had kept his job by turning state's witness against Goldwell, but he was on a tight leash. "We have an incoming chopper, multi-trauma, ETA 5 minutes. "I'm on it," Claire said. She walked to the ambulance bay doors. The rain was falling again, a soft drizzle this time. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Colonel Garrett Sterling sat in the driver's seat. He wasn't using a cane anymore. He was back in active duty fatigues, a duffel bag in the back. "Leaving again?" Claire asked, leaning against the car door. "Deployment," Garrett said. "Classified. You know how it is." "I know," she said. She reached in and took his hand. His skin was warm, his grip strong. "Be safe, Colonel." "I have the best nurse in the world waiting for me," Garrett smiled. "I have to come back." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and handed it to her. "What is this?" she asked. "Insurance," he said. "Open it when I get back. It's a promise." He kissed her hand, put the car in gear, and drove off into the rainy Chicago night. Claire watched him go, clutching the box. She didn't open it. She put it in her pocket, right next to her stethoscope. "Incoming!" a paramedic shouted. Claire turned back to the hospital. The lights were bright, the alarms were ringing, and there were lives to save. "Where's my nurse?" Dr. Thorne shouted from inside. Claire smiled, snapping on her gloves. "Right here," she said. "I'm right here." We often think heroes are the ones holding the guns or wearing the capes. But sometimes the greatest hero is the one holding a hand when the heart stops beating. Claire Bennett lost everything to do the right thing, proving that integrity is expensive, but it's the only currency that matters in the end. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe pays you back in the form of a special forces colonel who refuses to leave a soldier behind, even if that soldier wears scrubs. If this story had your heart racing, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Would you have risked your career to save a stranger like Claire did? Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story of justice, romance, and revenge. Thanks for watching.